The ocean was supposed to hide it. That was the whole point. No flag that matched the registry, no honest GPS signal. Name changed, ownership buried under shell companies and mailboxes in 3 different countries. For years, the oil tanker now called Skipper had lived in the gray zone, part of Iran's shadow fleet moving sanctioned crude to whoever would buy it, including China, Syria, and Venezuela. It had spoofed its location, lied about its cargo, turned its transponder off and on like a magician's trick. Then one night off the coast of Venezuela, the ocean stopped hiding it. A U.S. boarding team came down out of the dark, and a years-long sanctions evasion run ended in 15 minutes. What you're about to hear is a dramatized reconstruction inspired by the real U.S. seizure of the oil tanker Skipper in December 2025, based entirely on open-source reporting, satellite imagery analysis, and official statements. There's no classified information here, no secret leaks, but it is a realistic look at how a ghost tanker from Iran's shadow fleet ended up in U.S. custody in the Caribbean. Our story starts not at sea, but in an office. A grim one, thick binders, satellite photos, AIS tracks on a wall-sized screen, colored lines that seem to show ships calmly moving across the world. Except some of those lines are lies. A sanctions analyst with the U.S. Treasury taps a particular track, one that keeps doing something weird. "This one," she says, "different name every few years, flags that don't match any registry. Shows up off Singapore while satellite imagery catches it near Iran. Then suddenly it's in the Caribbean, loading in Venezuela. It's the same hull, just pretending to be 5 different ships." On the screen, the tanker is labeled Odessa, Skipper, IMO 9304667. Sanctioned since 2022 for moving oil on behalf of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and Hezbollah. Part of a network that funnels money into groups Washington calls terrorists. For years, Skipper has slipped in and out of ports. Karg Island, Iran, loading crude. Ship-to-ship transfers near Hong Kong. Cargo's ultimately delivered to a refinery in Yantai, China. Each trip is another middle finger to U.S. sanctions. Now the tanker is in a new pattern. It has just left Puerto Jose in Venezuela, heavy with nearly 1.8 million barrels of Venezuelan crude bound for Cuba and beyond. A lifeline cargo for 2 sanctioned regimes at once. To some in Washington, that makes it the perfect target. In a secure conference room, officials from Justice, Homeland Security, the Coast Guard, and the Pentagon sit around a table. On the screen, a zoomed-in satellite image of Skipper leaving Venezuelan waters, then turning east into the Caribbean. A Justice Department lawyer flips a page. "The seizure warrant is signed," she says. "Stateless, sanctioned vessel, part of an Iranian smuggling network. We have a few days before this expires. If we're going to do this, we need to hit it before it disappears into some other flag or some friendly port." A Coast Guard officer points at the map. "Right now she's here, south of Grenada between Trinidad and the Venezuelan coast. International waters, no territorial claim. We can reach her with a cutter and helo team from the carrier group." He taps another symbol. A U.S. Navy strike group lingering in the Caribbean as part of a deployment that has already seen airstrikes on alleged narco boats and tense flybys near Venezuela. Someone asks the obvious question. What if Maduro calls this an act of piracy? Silence. Then someone else answers, he's going to do that anyway. The point here isn't to make him happy. The point is to show that the shadow fleet isn't safe just because it sails under a fake flag 40 miles off his coast. They vote. The operation gets a green light. Off the coast of Venezuela, Skipper plows eastward through calm seas. She's big, over 300,000 deadweight tons, a very large crude carrier built in Japan in 2005. She used to sail under names like Toyo and Odessa. Now her hull says Skipper, and she's falsely flying the Guyanese flag even though Guyana has no record of her. On the bridge, the crew keeps a low profile. Most of them are just mariners, Nigerians, Filipinos, maybe some Eastern Europeans who signed up for a paycheck, not a geopolitical showdown. They know the ship is sanctioned. They've heard the rumors about IRGC and Hezbollah ties, about Iranian oil hidden under fake paperwork. But right now, all they care about is keeping the engine room running and the autopilot on course. They think the danger is from storms, pirates, or maybe a mechanical failure. They do not think about a helicopter. Over the horizon, on the deck of a U.S. carrier, rotors start to spin. A team of U.S. Coast Guard boarding officers, backed by Marine and Special Operations personnel, runs final checks. Body armor, sidearms, non-lethal gear, cameras, evidence kits. They've trained for this. Ship-to-ship boardings, high-risk warrants, taking control of big hulls without firing a shot. The helo lifts off, another following behind it. Below, a U.S. Coast Guard cutter changes course to converge with Skipper's projected track. The plan is simple. The cutter hails the tanker. The helicopters drop the team on deck. The ship is secured and diverted under U.S. control. Simple, of course, never means easy. In Caracas, word of increased U.S. naval activity has already put Maduro's government on edge. Recent U.S. airstrikes on suspected drug-running boats have killed dozens. Venezuela is mobilizing troops, calling the deployment an invasion waiting to happen. Nobody wants Skipper to be the spark that lights that fuse. The Caribbean night is warm. Stars are out. Skipper's bridge watch sees a faint light approaching on the radar. Maybe a patrol vessel, maybe a fishing boat, maybe nothing. Then the radio crackles. Motor tanker Skipper, this is United States Coast Guard warship, calling you on VHF Channel 16. The officer of the watch exchanges a look with the captain. They both know what that means. Stateless sanctioned ships don't get friendly visits. They answer, trying to sound calm. This is Skipper. Go ahead, U.S. Coast Guard. Skipper, be advised. Under authority of a United States federal seizure warrant, we intend to board your vessel. Follow our instructions and maintain current course and speed. On the bridge, the temperature seems to drop. No weapons, no escort, no Venezuelan Navy ship in sight. The crew knows that if they resist, they will lose and risk turning a legal case into something far bloodier. They comply. Up above, the helo pilots can now see the tanker's long, dark shape cutting through the water. Spotlights snap on. The rotor wash whips spray off the deck as the aircraft hovers low over the stern. A rope drops. Boots follow. The boarding team hits the deck in a practiced flow, two covering, two moving, everyone clipped into safety lines. U.S. Coast Guard, one shouts. Remain where you are, hands visible. Surprised crew members in coveralls freeze, eyes wide. There are no shots, no struggle. Within minutes, the team has reached the bridge. The captain stands with his hands open, eyes darting between the Americans and his own bewildered officers. You are in control of my ship now, he asks. The lead officer nods. Yes, Captain, under U.S. law, this vessel is subject to seizure. We will treat your crew safely, but from this point on, Skipper is under our custody. Somewhere in Miami, a federal judge's signature on a piece of paper has just become very real. The boarding team secures the navigation controls, checks the engine orders, and establishes a course to a U.S. designated anchorage, where the tanker will be inspected, documented, and eventually taken to a port under American jurisdiction. They photograph everything: the bridge log, the cargo manifest, any evidence of tampered AIS equipment, any traces of recent ship-to-ship transfers. This isn't just about one tanker. It's about proving in court and to the world that Skipper was part of a sanctions-busting network tied to Iran's oil industry and Venezuela's state firm PDVSA. In Washington, the news breaks fast. Trump goes on camera and says with obvious satisfaction, We've just seized a very large tanker off the coast of Venezuela, a big one, the biggest one we've ever taken, and we seized it for a very good reason. He's asked what the US will do with it. He shrugs. We keep it, I guess. The message is clear. The era of letting the shadow fleet glide by is over. In Caracas, Maduro's government explodes. State TV calls the seizure an act of piracy, maritime terrorism, a direct attack on our sovereignty. Venezuela accuses the US of trying to strangle its economy and even lashes out at Trinidad and Tobago, claiming it helped Washington by allowing access to its airports and radar. They cancel gas deals, threaten retaliation, and demand the tanker's release. In Tehran, the foreign ministry mouths a familiar line, an act of piracy with no basis in international law, which all countries should condemn. In Havana, officials rage too. Skipper had offloaded a portion of its cargo to another ship, Neptune 6, destined for Cuba. That crude was part of Havana's secret lifeline, oil that keeps the lights on and the regime afloat. Now it's in US hands. Cuban diplomats call the seizure maritime terrorism aimed at choking their survival fuel. On trading desks in Houston, London, and Singapore, the reaction is less emotional. They watch tanker tracking software and notice something. Other ships start to turn around. A VLCC carrying Russian naphtha for PDVSA suddenly changes course. Several supertankers that were on their way to load Venezuelan crude decide maybe they don't want to be anywhere near these waters right now. Within days, exports from Venezuela drop sharply. Estimates say from over 1 million barrels a day in September to barely 700,000 in December, with only Chevron-licensed tankers still moving freely. More than 30 sanctioned ships sit at anchor, afraid to leave. Whatever you think of US policy, the tactical signal is undeniable. If you're on the sanctions list and you head into open water, you might not come back. At a think tank in Brussels, an analyst traces the ripple effects on a map. Look at this, he says. One boarding off Venezuela and suddenly you've got Iranian oil flows disrupted, Cuban supplies endangered, Venezuela's exports squeezed, and tanker rates rising because shadow fleet ships are too scared to sail. His colleague nods. And Iran's shadow network just lost one of its veteran hulls. Skipper had been doing this for years, spoofing, flag hopping, running sanctioned cargoes. Now every captain in that dark fleet is asking, am I next? On the ship itself, life is less abstract. The crew is now stuck in a strange limbo, still living aboard but under US guard. They're interviewed, their passports checked, their contracts dissected. Most of them won't face charges. They'll eventually be repatriated, maybe blacklisted by some companies, maybe not. For them, Skipper was just a job. For the networks behind her, she was a multi-million-dollar weapon. In a federal court, prosecutors lay out the case. Skipper, formerly Adisa, sanctioned in 2022 for moving oil that funded IRGC, QF, and Hezbollah. Skipper spoofing AIS, turning its transponder on and off, faking locations while loading in Iran and discharging in Asia. Skipper now carrying Venezuelan crude toward Cuba in violation of both Iran and Venezuela sanctions. The judge listens, asks questions, and eventually signs off on what was already physically true. This ship now belongs to the case, and maybe one day to the US government. In Caracas, state TV runs documentary-style pieces about the stolen ship, blaming everything on imperialism and foreign piracy. In the slums of Caracas and the industrial towns along the Orinoco, ordinary Venezuelans see gas lines grow and power blackouts worsen and wonder, as always, who is really paying the price. In Tehran, planners adjust. One ship gone, thousands of barrels interrupted. But the shadow fleet still has hundreds of hulls. Old rust-stained, often uninsured, flagged to microstates, hauled around the world by captains willing to trade risk for money. They will route around this seizure, hire new lawyers, create new shell companies, spoof new tracks. The US knows this, which is why Skipper was never about stopping everything. It was about showing something to Caracas, to Tehran, to ship owners in Athens and Dubai and Singapore. For years, the Dark Fleet operated on a simple assumption. If you stay just outside someone's territorial waters, hide your AIS signal, and keep your paperwork just confusing enough, no one will come down from the sky to take your bridge. On 10th of December 2025, that assumption died somewhere between Grenada and Trinidad, under the blades of a US helicopter. The ocean can still hide a lot. But now, every ghost tanker slipping through the Caribbean at night has to live with one more question. Is that radar blip just another storm? Or is it the cutter and the helo that turn you from a shadow into evidence?